Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, a free site, bettingangle.us, a free site. It is March the 8th, 2023. Let's talk heavyweight boxing. But first, remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, Olympic gold medalist, a guy who beat Philly Bergovic, a guy who beat Joe Joyce in the amateurs, Tony Yoka, got beaten by Martin Bakole. He has a loss, folks. Bakole, a long-range hooker, was the aggressive fighter. Backed up and beat up Tony Yoka, in my opinion. Skeptics should not embrace the scoring in that fight. I believe Bakole won that fight by a few rounds. So Tony Yoka is now fighting 42-year-old Carlos Takam. But I want people to understand, in the heavyweight division, they age more slowly. In my favorites list here is Takam's last fight. It's against Arlinsbek Makhmudov, a name you need to know. An unbeaten up-and-coming heavyweight. Now let me just say, there are some vets who reach a point in their career where they want to add to their house. It's about the money, right? They'll come out against a young guy. They know they're viewed as a litmus test. They'll fight tough for a few rounds, but they don't expect to win. They understand the politics of boxing. They understand younger fighters have more people behind them, right? Fans, promoters, media outlets, right? So the older guy is just there to make a showing and then to pick up a paycheck. Then you have the other kind of older fighter. We'll put Luis Ortiz in this category. We'll put Carlos Takam in this category. Ortiz just gave Andy Ruiz one of the toughest fights of Andy's career, if not the toughest. Right? Well, just understand. Carlos Takam against Makhmudov, right? Again, unbeaten, young, larger heavyweight. If you look at that film, folks, you won't be able to find a guy in his 40s in that film. Takam is the vet who wants the ring. He wants the crown. He wants the belt. This is the guy who's been fighting a long time, who is literally the definition of the cagey vet. Right? Let's name a few of the guys he's fought. Former heavyweight champion Povetkin. Former heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua. Joe Joyce. Jerry Forrest. Derek Chisora. Former heavyweight champion Joseph Parker. In other words, this is the guy who's kept himself in great shape, who still views himself as in contention, who's still fighting young guys with very bright futures. And when he shows up, he is prepared to go 10 rounds. So, in 4 of his last 5 fights, let me repeat this. In 4 of his last 5 fights, Carlos Takam has gone the distance. Right? Takam shows up. He's not going to be discouraged. In the Makhmudov fight, and understand, Makhmudov has one of the division's better straight right hands. He's sneaky with it. He can throw it at a bit of an odd angle because he can bend his body slightly to the left and throw it right down the middle. Against Makhmudov, Takam comes out. Picture this. You're in your 40s. You're fighting an unbeaten prospect. And Takam gets knocked down in the first minute of the fight. He's clearly not prepared for Makhmudov's right hand. Well, Takam gets off the canvas, folks. Gets hit with several more right hands. But now Carlos's pride takes over. That's the kind of guy he is. And Carlos puts himself back in the fight. We get to the 7th round. Takam gets knocked down again. Now, if ever there's a time when a vet could say to himself, okay, that's it. I've made a showing here. It's a 10-round fight. I've been knocked down twice against an unbeaten prospect. You would think Takam would say, okay, not my night. No need for me to take more punishment. I'm just going to stay here on the canvas, or I'm just going to have my corner wave off the fight in between rounds. No, folks, that's get the personality here. That's not Carlos Takam. Takam gets off the canvas a second time. He goes the distance against Makhmudov. That's his last fight. So, now we have him in against Tony Yoka. And Yoka is coming off a loss. If you're a skeptic of Yoka's, as I am, you start to wonder whether he really did beat Joe Joyce. I would say no. You start to wonder whether he really did beat Ergovic. I would say no. I understand the country of France is going to disagree with me, and okay, that's fine. But Yoka is a guy who, let's just say, was highly decorated and was very media friendly as an amateur. Right? The public loves a guy who just naturally comes across like a hero. But now it's the pros. Now he's facing hungry guys who themselves want titles. Right now he's dealing with guys who think, okay, Tony, I know you have a 75% KO ratio. Let me repeat that, a 75% KO ratio. But I think I hit hard. I'm on my front foot. I'm in your face. What exactly are you going to do about it? The bet I like in this fight is the over 8.5 rounds. Yes, it's Tony Yoka, 30, against a guy who's 12 years older, who got knocked down twice in his last fight. And not only am I taking the over, folks, the casino has made the over 8.5 a minus 150. Right? Let me just point out, too, that these young fighters who get fed a lot of lines by promoters, by the press, by fans, about how great they are, when they lose and they realize they don't have an S on their chest, they're not Superman, right? They're a face in the crowd, and it's a crowd that's highly competitive in heavyweight boxing. A lot can happen, right? Here's what I think I know. Carlos Takam is going to come out on his front foot. Carlos Takam is going to be throwing very heavy left hooks. Carlos Takam's not going to be bashful. Takam, a 42-year-old, is going to have great stamina. Right? There's not going to be a round where Takam is breathing through his mouth and he's trying to hide and he's not. No. This is a guy who is prepared to go 10 rounds. Let me just say, I think Tony Yoka, who is a pretty good boxer, but even with a 75% KO ratio, I don't think has a big punch. Right? I think Yoka, and the fight's in Yoka's backyard. Right? Yoka is very popular in France. Let's recognize where the fight is. Right? I believe Yoka's going to come out and he's going to try to get back his courage. He's going to box with Carlos Takam for a while. just to get the thought of losing to Bacoli out of his head. One judge had that fight a draw. I have no idea what that judge was watching. Another judge only had Bacoli winning by 2 rounds. There again, I don't understand what fight that judge was watching. I believe Yoka knows he got beaten up. I believe Yoka's going to come out now and he's going to try to box a little bit, carry the fight a little bit, in part because Takam has a great chin, right? The guy who stopped Takam, the only stoppage Takam has suffered in his last 5 fights was at the hands of Joe Joyce, a much more aggressive fighter than Tony Yoka, right? I believe it's going to take Yoka 3 rounds just to get reacclimated to a real fight in front of a paying crowd, right? Something that's not a sparring session following his first loss. So I like the over. Let's get controversial, though. Just like when Roy Jones lost to Antonio Tarver, and Roy was a great fighter, right? Roy, arguably at that point, is the best in the sport pound for pound. After Roy lost to Antonio Tarver, he started losing fights, folks. Understand, a Superman type loses a fight. And I'm not talking about the Montel Griffin fight, which technically was a loss, but you and I know better. I'm talking about when Jones gets stopped by Magic Man Antonio Tarver, right? Understand, opponents then start to think to themselves, well, I can't match the guy in speed, right? It's unlikely that I'm going to beat the guy by decision. I just saw Antonio Tarver knock out Roy Jones. Maybe I need to come in here and swing for the fences, right? You might remember Glenn Johnson stopping Roy Jones after that. Well, Tony Yoka didn't get stopped by Martin Bacoli, but he might as well have been, right? Bacoli at times is walking him down. I encourage people to look at that fight. Bacoli, by the way, is a name you need to know, right? Let's say the heavyweight division has some guys who are just off center stage. So I believe it's going to take, emotionally, Tony Yoka some time just to deal with the fact that he's no longer unbeaten. And I'm just telling you, if Carlos Takam has been in the ring with multiple heavyweight champs, and if Takam's style is to throw winging hooks, power shots, and to come forward, right? Keep in mind, Takam knocked down in the first round against Makhmudov. Then he starts getting Makhmudov on the ropes. I'm not kidding, right? Since Takam is a tough man, since Takam doesn't believe he's over the hill, right? He thinks he's a cut above these young guys who are relatively unproven. Since Takam can sit down with the film of Bacoli's victory over Yoka, the hedge on the over 8.5 rounds, right? Which is really the base bet here. It's a minus 150. But understand, the casino's giving me a plus 425 on Takam to win the fight. I'm going to sprinkle some there too, right? So what I'm hoping is if Yoka wins by decision, okay, I'm good. I'm like, all right, that's fine. If Yoka is like Roy Jones and isn't yet mentally over his first real loss as a pro, and isn't prepared to deal with a front foot heavy, hard punch throwing Carlos Takam, right? Then maybe lightning strikes, right? The one thing I do know is Takam is going to be active. That doesn't take a genius. I encourage you to look in my favorites folder at that Makhmudov fight. Folks, he's not going to France to do a lot of sightseeing and to just watch Tony Yoka set up a jab. No, Takam is going to be bending, he's going to be moving, he's going to be throwing punches. And the one thing you know is that even now, if he gets knocked out twice, he's going to try to get up and continue fighting. Right? There's some of us, and Joshua was beating him, but there's some of us who were disappointed when the ref stopped his fight against Anthony Joshua. I like the over 8.5 rounds. That's the midway point of the 9th round in a 10-round fight involving a 42-year-old coming off a loss. I like the over 8.5 rounds. I'm going to swing for the fences and throw some as a hedge on Takam to win. I expect Yoka to win. But the way the odds are structured, I need to take a swing with Carlos Takam. Right? The open question here, it's the referendum in the fight, is Tony Yoka prepared to deal with a front foot heavy, hard-hitting, determined KG vet? We'll find out in a few days. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.